Well, so the question really isn't, so we choose the question, are we doing enough? Not about security professionals, but of sort of all the ancillary groups that are now involved in cybersecurity that didn't used to be. Right? So we're talking about legal counsel, the communications team, HR. And so that's really what the question is oriented around. It's really understanding why those functional groups in an organization are now involved in the cybersecurity problem or cybersecurity issues, and figuring out whether what their role is, why they're doing it, and what value they bring to it. And then asking the question, are the IT security professionals or the security team that's been doing this for 30 years, are they using those levers the right way? So we as lawyers or communications professionals need to be asking, are we doing enough? But then the question should be turned on to the security professionals who've been doing this for 30 years and saying, are we doing enough to support you? And the answer, I think, is always we can do better. I think as the landscape shifts underneath us, we can always be doing a better job at what we're doing. So with big data analytics getting more and more important in cybersecurity tools and cybersecurity defense systems, I think lawyers have to be much more heavily involved because they create privacy concerns and cybersecurity concerns and just sort of general risk management issues. Are we getting involved in helping manage those assessments, those cybersecurity assessments under the privilege? Are we doing the right thing to sort of help map what the legal risks are in mitigating or remediating or not remediating certain vulnerabilities that we've identified in the system? So it's an ongoing conversation, and it shouldn't ever be, we should never rest on our laurels and say we're doing enough, but we also shouldn't look at what we're doing and think that we haven't come a pretty long way. So I think it's about building partnerships inside your organization. And I think that there's historically there's a reluctance or a hesitation among any functional group to let any other one partner with them. They're worried about whether they have the right territory, whether they know what they're doing, are they just going to make it harder for me to do my job? And I think we have to just break those barriers down and realize this is truly sort of enterprise-wide. It truly is cross-functional. And then we just have to begin building partnerships with the communications team and having briefing with them so they understand what we're doing. And they don't have to be every day or every week. That's probably too much. But once a month, once a quarter, having those briefings so that they have, the communications team, for example, can just understand what the landscape is and understand what we're doing so that when there's an issue that they need to respond to, they're educated. They're not spending half their time learning about all this stuff. So the thing that the government can do better is providing and establishing information sharing platforms that address the privacy concerns that privacy advocates are worried about, but also create an opportunity to actually share valuable intelligence that they're gathering in all the various ways that they can gather it. And I think that's principle among it. I don't think legislation solves this problem in the sense of, I don't think a new data breach law is going to help, or reforming surveillance laws, or just an information sharing bill. It actually needs to be operational. And I think that once the government begins to realize that they can't just push it through, it's got to address privacy concerns, because if it doesn't, companies are not going to do it. Companies have to balance what they need in security and what they're doing in privacy. And if the government is creating a platform that doesn't allow them to make that balance, it's not going to be used. And it's just going to be, it's not going to have very much value to it. I think it's recognizing that there is a tension between those two things and what the government wants to do, and figuring out a way to operationalize it in a way that's meaningful to companies and addresses those concerns. So I think that if there are two keys in incident response planning, it's make sure you have the right team and they understand their roles and they're agreed on at the onset, so that the communications team knows what their role is, the security team knows what their role is, the legal team knows what their role is, and structure that. Have those structures in place so everybody knows who to be looking to for what advice or what information, and ultimately that the legal team has principal responsibility for directing the investigation, so that the process of the investigation and what we learn out of the investigation can be protected to the maximum extent by the attorney-client privilege. So that's the first thing. It's sort of establishing that framework. And the second thing is test it, right? It does no good to write a plan and put it on a shelf and say it's the greatest plan in the world if you never test it. and never simulate it, never tabletop it. So really what I would do is I would put together the team, make sure they understand their responsibilities, who's going to lead and who's going to follow, and how people are going to work in collaboration together, and then actually run through simulations of that. Everything else you can figure out in the middle, but those I would say are sort of keystones. So to me, this was the year of sort of proactive preparedness. I think we spent more time working with clients on the proactive side than on the reactive side. We spent most of the first 6 months of the year doing that. And so I think that trend's going to continue. I think board awareness and assumption of responsibility for the issue is going to increase. I think that proactive work is going to continue to go forward. I think we as counsel are going to get more involved in the assessments and the reporting and the risk management and mitigation steps. I think from the outside perspective, I think we're going to see information sharing become a reality because it just is so valuable. We're going to see big data analytics take a much larger role in the development of cybersecurity tools and defense measures because the intelligence you can gather about your employees and their behavior and where they're leaving the network vulnerable is just invaluable. And I think that's going to continue. From the hacker side, it's just going to be more of the same. I think we're going to see more big data type breaches where what they're after is the same things that we're looking at. So I think the OPM breach is not going to be an aberration, and they're going to look at large warehouses for lots of information because they're going to do the same analytics that we're doing, and that's how they're going to outsmart the system. They're going to try and stay one step ahead, and the only way to do that is to get the data, play with it themselves, and understand what it tells them, and use that to develop predictive behavior because it's going to get better cybersecurity attacks by doing it. So we just have to be sort of ahead of that game. I had a really interesting conversation with a forensic examiner that said as he was looking at code one time, he identified errors in the code that made the code do something completely different. And I think it's a great point is that sometimes sabotage and sometimes disruption of business through a simple means in terms of changing the data or manipulating it is going to be a key driver. We're already seeing some competitors, nation-state competitors, attack clients and manipulate their financials, change the reporting issues in SAP, for example, so the companies can't actually meet their obligations. They can really forestall a business. It's hard to say. I mean, we've had data breaches before, and there was something about what happened in December of 2013 that changed the landscape fundamentally. And it's hard to really put your finger on what that was. Was it the dribbles of information that continued to change? Was it the mix of merchants and retailers that were breached? Was it they were all just concentrated in the high pressure holiday season? I don't know the answer to those. So it's hard to really predict what's going to change public sentiment on it. I worry that there's a little bit of sort of the public is getting a little numb to it. It's not that big a deal. I'm not sure if the OPM breach shook that confidence. I'm not sure if the IRS breach shook that confidence. But we're getting to a point where there's going to be a breach and it's going to fundamentally shake our confidence in the market. Maybe it's a financial institution. Maybe it's critical infrastructure. Maybe someone's going to do real harm. They're going to do physical harm to an environment. But it's really difficult to say. It's such a complicated question. So, still going to go shop there. Still going to do your thing. Yeah, I think it's the right point. I mean, I think look. I think the attack that has a physical manifestation in the day-to-day lives of Americans is probably the thing that's going to change the landscape the easiest. That's what I think. I mean, so is it going to take that? I don't know. Will that get it done? Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Aravind.
Great.
It was so nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice meeting you too. Thank you very much.